And in this sense, Wordsworth was recollecting his earlier visit which he had made alone in the year 1793 to the banks of the Wye, to Tintern Abbey. So here he is returning to this place 5 years later, and this time he is accompanied by his sister Dorothy Wordsworth. And you will find in the poem how when he was younger, of course he was much younger during his first visit, and the emotions, the feelings that he had undergone, those are now being reproduced in the uh, way his sister is reacting to the beauty of this place. So William Wordsworth, as a poet, of course, he is regarded as one of the greatest poets in the English language, and his importance lies in the fact that how he had sort of established this romantic movement in poetry. Now, we can talk about the pre-romantic poets. Some of them were quite well-known poets, like, for example, Thomas Gray was there, James Thomson, uh, and of course William Blake, who should be called a romantic poet. He should not be designated as a pre-romantic poet. The kind of uh, poems that he wrote. So, but it was Wordsworth along with Coleridge who sort of gave this a more, you can say, popularized version. You can look at it this way. So with this short introduction, I would go to the poem itself, and in another way, Wordsworth is different in the sense that how he, in the later part of the poem, the middle part, I think, yes, he establishes this triad of nature, man, and God, the Trinity, as it were, how everything is related, which is designated as the pantheism of Wordsworth. So that is another important thing that we have to remember, and that is explained or formulated in this particular poem. Now let us, I will share the screen with you, the poem that is. This is the poem which we would be studying. Okay, so I think it is visible to you, the poem. Can you see the poem here? Tintern Abbey on revisiting the banks. Sorry, it's the lines composed a few miles above Tintern Abbey on revisiting the banks of the Wye during a tour, July 13, 1798. So here, as you can see, the poem is referred to generally to as Tintern Abbey. That's the shorter, more convenient kind of a title that we refer to it. But actually the title is a bit longer, as you can see. And if we concentrate on this particular title of the poem, the important word is revisiting. Revisiting is the important word. And this is a second visit. So that the first visit was in 1793, 5 years earlier. And this is the second visit. This time he is not alone, as I told you. He is in the company of his sister. And the second visit is somewhat different from the first one. And how is it different? What is Wordsworth's reaction to this? The place is the same, and but the the way in which Wordsworth looks at this scenery, his viewpoint has changed somewhat. So let us read this poem. Start reading, and we will look at the beautiful descriptions that we will get here. 5 years have passed, 5 summers, with the length of 5 long winters. And again I hear these waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. So the very first expression that is, he is thinking of the passage of time, how 5 years have passed since his last visit to this particular place. 5 summers with the length of 5 long winters. So those winters were really interminable ones, very long winters, which Wordsworth presumably did not enjoy because he perhaps couldn't go out on his tours, walking tours. And again, I hear these waters. So this word again, so there is a repetition. These waters rolling from their mountain springs with a soft inland murmur. So the sound of the waterfall falling from the mountains, coming down with a murmuring sound, with a soft murmuring sound, which is very easy or beautiful to hear. So as you can see here, that there is a kind of a looking back to the old time, the time when he was a bit younger. Wordsworth was visiting this place alone. Now, once again, so note this, once again, do I behold these steep and lofty cliffs that on a wild, secluded scene impress thoughts of more deep seclusion. So he has come back to this place and he is once again looking at these steep and lofty, very high cliffs, mountains, that on a wild, secluded scene. So this scene is a kind of a solitary kind of a place. This place is cut off from the habitation of mankind. People don't live in this place. No one lives in this place. Impress thoughts of more deep seclusion. So if one comes here, if one looks at the scenery here, one would feel a kind of a loneliness. But feeling of loneliness would sort of encompass a person and connect the landscape with the quiet of the sky. So the landscape here, the beautiful landscape all around him, that is connected with the quiet of the sky. So here, of course, we can see the description of the place. Wordsworth is describing the surrounding landscape with its beautiful waterfall, the big high cliffs, and the general lonely, or a kind of a, you can say, a very still and calm kind of a place, except the sound of the waterfall. The day is come when I again repose here under this dark sycamore and view these plots of cottage ground, these orchard tufts. So again, this word, this word is being repeatedly used by Wordsworth in order to impose upon or emphasize the fact that this is not a first visit. This is a second visit, and he is looking at the scenery for the second time. So this is the second time that he is reposing, or he is taking rest under this dark sycamore tree, and he is looking at the surrounding plots of cottage ground, which can be viewed from this place, which at this season with their unripe fruits are clad in one green hue, and lose themselves mid groves and copses. So everything is green. Nature is in its uh, wearing its green armor or green cloth and green hue color. So the time for ripening, the season of autumn, as you know, there is this poem by John Keats, "To Autumn." Perhaps it is there in your syllabus. Uh, Now, there Keats talks about the season of mellow fruitfulness, when all the fruits and vegetables they are ripened. This is not that season. So everywhere there is a greenery, and it is difficult to distinguish between the trees and the groves, the bushes, the small shrubs, all that. Everything is blended, as it were. Once again I see these hedgerows, hardly hedgerows, little lines of sportive wood run wild. So nature is in its kind of a primeval beauty here. It is running free here and there in a sportive, in a very, in a way uh, which is in a glad way. These pastoral farms, green to the very door. So the shrubs and the clinging vines which are there, which are coming down to the door from the roof, and wreaths of smoke sent up in silence from among the trees. So the place is generally devoid of any human habitation, but the poet can see this, the wreaths of smoke which is rising in the sky, with some uncertain notice, as might seem, of vagrant dwellers in the houseless woods, or of some hermit's cave where by his fire the hermit sits alone. So this might be caused, the fire, the smoke might be caused by, it has been lit perhaps by some vagrant dwellers, by some vagabond who moves about from place to place, who does not have a permanent dwelling. And he has perhaps come to this forest, this wood, and taken temporary shelter here. Or perhaps there is some hermit, hermit meaning some kind of a recluse from society, an individual who has shunned society and people, and he has come here to live in a cave, and he is sitting by his fire, and this fire is giving out the smoke which is going up into the sky. So this is the first stanza of the poem. And here, of course, the general beauty of the place, the scenery of the place, that is mentioned, that is described. And the fact that this place is uh, is being seen by what? By the poet for the second time, that is emphasized. So the kind of place, the kind of emotion that Wordsworth feels for this place, we can see that. Sorry. These beauteous forms. So the start of the second stanza, these beauteous forms, through a long absence, have not been to me, as is a landscape to a blind man's eye. So Wordsworth says that he had been absent from this place for 5 years. He had visited this place in 1793, and it is now 1798, and he is back again to this place. Beauteous forms, meaning beautiful forms, scenery. Long absence, that is of 5 years. Now, he has not been blind. Blind man's eye here means that he has not been blind to the beauty of this place. But oft, in lonely rooms, amid the din of towns and cities, I have owed to them, in hours of weariness, sensations sweet, felt in the blood, and felt along the heart. So he is saying that what has happened to him when he was living in the city of London, and when he was alone, sitting in a room, and he was feeling very lonely, and everywhere around him the bustle, the din and bustle of the towns and cities, the outside life, that was forever moving on. He was feeling very much depressed. Now, during these times, he had thought about this place. I have owed to them. So he had been, you know, sort of thinking of this place. And he felt a kind of gratitude that in these hours of weariness, some sweet sensations of this place came back to him, felt in the blood and felt along the heart, and passing even into my purer mind with tranquil restoration. So it is a kind of a therapeutic effect. The beauty of nature has a kind of a medicinal quality, a kind of a restorative quality for Wordsworth. So it is not just something to be enjoyed, something to be looked at, enjoyed temporarily, and then forgotten. That is not the case with Wordsworth. So he is saying that these beautiful scenes went deep into his heart, as if they mingled with his bloodstream into his heart. It went into his heart. It was carried along into his heart. And it passed into his brain, his mind. And it has provided him with a very calm and tranquil building up, rebuilding of his you can say, a kind of restoration of his faculties. So the word restoration, a kind of a rebuilding, a resuscitation, something that has had a very wonderfully wonderful and beautiful effect on his mind and heart. So the lonely hours that he had spent in the city, those hours often bowed him down, often depressed him, but not fully, because he had the sweet sensations of this particular place in his mind, and he could go back mentally to this place. Feelings too of unremembered pleasure, such perhaps as have no slight or trivial influence on that best portion of a good man's life, his little nameless, unremembered acts of kindness and of love. So he's saying here, just let us go back to this line, these two lines, feelings too of unremembered pleasure. Some of the pleasures, some of the beautiful scenery he might have absorbed, he might not be remembering. But those were perhaps trivial. They did not have a very, you can say, very final or permanent influence on his life. Wordsworth is here talking about a person who tries to do something good for his fellow beings. It's like that. Someone who does some kind acts out of love, out of kindness, and that is the best part of his life. Something that would have some little influence perhaps, but still it is an act of kindness, an act of love. So nature had worked like that. It had that kind of slow and steady influence on his life. Nor less, I trust, to them I may have owed another gift of aspect more sublime. So not only these trivial gifts of raising up my spirits when I was feeling bored, I was feeling very much depressed, but something else which is more serious, which is of a more sublime nature. That blessed mood in which the burden of the mystery, in which the heavy and the weary weight of all this unintelligible world is lightened. So the fact of we being present in this world, the fact that we have to live our lives, it is a kind of a burden that we have to carry. It is a mysterious thing. Life is a mysterious thing. And often we do not know what we are living for. It becomes unintelligible. We do not find answers to our questions. And the burden becomes too much. The living of our lives, because of the pain, because of the suffering that we encounter. But Wordsworth is here saying that blessed mood, that beautiful blessed mood, which is brought about by the touch of nature, and which gives it a more, you can say, uh, a separate dimension, in that it is able to unravel the mystery of life. It is lightened, the burden is lightened. That serene and blessed mood. So, the calm and quiet, tranquil mood, in which the affections gently lead us on. The affections, the emotions, the feelings, that everything that we have, that everything that our heart sort of, you know, uh, in a sense, it can feel and express, until the breath of this corporeal frame and even the motion of our human blood almost suspended. So this is his, you can see, uh, the theory that he had expounded, the unity between nature, man, and God, which is called his pantheism. that is being expounded slowly. He is trying to initiate his readers into this kind of a theory. So the breath of the corporeal frame, corporeal means bodily frame, our physical existence, and the motion of our, even the motion of our human blood almost suspended. So the fact that we exist in a physical condition, in a bodily state, we tend to forget that. That is suspended. That is almost as if we do not feel the burden of life. We are laid asleep in body. So we lose our outer consciousness. We go deep inside and become a living soul. So the soul that is within each one of us, that is awakened, a living soul. And while with an eye made quiet by the power of harmony and the deep power of joy, we see into the life of things. So this is his theory about how nature's nature is a kind of a blessing. It is a kind of a boon, a power that enables us to look inwards. The harmony that exists between human beings, nature, and God. Uh, of course, the concept of God would come in the next stanzas. Here, he is talking about the harmonious existence between nature and man, and the deep ecstatic joy that one feels when one comes in contact with the pure and beautiful nature. As if we get the ability, the capacity to look into the life of things, to look into the innermost mysteries of our lives. So that is perhaps Wordsworth was trying to say in these lines, the kind of effect that nature had on him, and particularly this area along the valley of the river Wye. So this portion, this stanza is of course quite important. How Wordsworth was sort of resuscitated, he was re-energized during his times of, boredom and depression. If this be but a vain belief, yet oh, how oft in darkness and amid the many shapes of joyless daylight, when the fretful star unprofitable and the fever of the world have hung upon the beatings of my heart, how oft in spirit have I turned to thee, O sylvan Wye, thou wanderer through the woods, how often has my spirit turned to thee. So he is recounting his sort of he is thinking of the effect that this beautiful scenery had on him, and he's saying that in darkness, how often, this is not a vain belief, this is not something that he is making up, actual, this is a real feeling. And during the times of darkness and many shapes of joyless daylight, that is the time that is spent in the city. Wordsworth was not fond of the city life like Charles Lamb was. Charles Lamb was very much fond of city life, the London life, but Wordsworth preferred the country life, the to be amidst nature. And so to him, the city life was joyless. And when the fretful star unprofitable, fretful, so all the time a kind of a rush, a kind of a journey, a kind of a disturbance, anxiousness, anxiety, unprofitable, that does not lead you to anything profitable, that does not add value to your life. And the fever of the word. Look at the use of this word, fever. Fever means disease, some kind of a disease. When you have fever, you fall sick. Obviously, you are no longer in good health. So he is talking of this particular influence of city life uh, to be like a fever, something that did not or could not provide him with all the joys and the you can say the calmness of uh, rural life, have hung upon the beatings of my heart. So my heart had been beating, and it had become heavy with this anxiety. So in spirit, mentally that is, not physically, because he had not been able to visit this Y Valley for 5 years. I have turned to thee. Have I turned to thee? So I have been turning to you for sustenance, for nourishment. O sylvan Y, this is green, the green Y, thou wanderer through the woods. Wanderer through the woods, of course, it means how the river is meandering through the woods. How often has my spirit turned to thee? So this is the kind of acknowledgement, you can say, the kind of acknowledgement that Wordsworth sort of makes for the how the river Wye has been a kind of a great influence in his life. When he was lonely, when he was kind of all alone in the city of London. So the sylvan Wye, the forest that was moving through the forest, had its uh, influence on his life. So this is a short stanza, but here there is the affirmation of the fact of what he had said earlier, that it had been a kind of a very beautiful and kind of an energizing effect, the scenery that he beholds again now. And now, with gleams of half-extinguished thought, with many recognitions dim and faint, and somewhat of a sad perplexity, the picture of the mind revives again. So, this is his theory of emotion recollected in tranquility, about which he had spoken in the preface to the lyrical ballads. And of course, as you can see, glimpse of half extinguished thought. So some of the experiences, uh, as 5 years have passed, of course, they have become dim. He is not able to remember them correctly, because they have become slightly dim. But faintly, it comes back. He recognizes, it's kind of a recognition of the old feelings, emotions that had that had arisen in his mind, that had risen in his mind when he had seen this particular place, and somewhat of a sad perplexity. The picture of the mind revives again. So it is a kind of a revival, a resuscitation, you can say. The mind had stored the picture of this place, the beautiful and serene, calm area. This place had been there, stored in his mind, in his brain for 5 years. And now, when he is again here upon the banks of the Wye, looking at the scenery here. It is reviving. While here I stand, not only with the sense of present pleasure, but with pleasing thoughts that in this moment there is life and food for future years. So, of course, when he is standing here, uh, he he is feeling a pleasure, he is feeling a joy that is there in his heart. But he has other thoughts, other pleasing thoughts. Uh, in this moment, there is life and food for future years. So here, Wordsworth is again thinking of the future. He will go back to his house. He will go back home, carrying in his heart the scenery, the beautiful scenery, the feelings, thoughts that have risen in response to this scenery. And maybe after some years have passed, he will again compose a new poem. So food, life and food for future years. And it will help him, this scenery will help him to live on, to survive in a more worthy way when he would feel depressed and lonely. So the recognition, which is dim and faint, and it is somewhat mixed with a sense of sadness, a kind of a confusion because of the passage of time. The passage of time has dimmed his recognition. It has brought in a kind of a suffering that he had to encounter during his stay in the city. But the fact that he is standing here and he's looking at this scenery is in itself an assurance for him. It is an assurance of how it would help him to survive in the future years. And so I dare to hope, though changed, no doubt, from what I was when first I came among these hills. So he is saying that I dare to hope. I have this hope within my heart that the fact is that I have changed. 5 years ago, when I first came here, I was a different person. When, like a roe, I bounded toward the mountains, mountains by the sides of the deep rivers and the lonely streams, wherever nature led. So during that time, in 1793, he had come there, he had come to this place alone, and he had behaved like a young deer. A roe is a young deer, which of course, as all young animals are like that, they want to explore. When they are very young, they frisk about, jump about here and there. So he compares himself, his reactions uh, during the first visit to the reactions of a roe, which bounds over the mountains and the sides of the deep rivers. So his reaction was like that. He was going wherever his eyes led him, wherever nature was calling him. So it was a spontaneous reaction on his part, like that of a young animal, young deer. More like a man flying from something that he dreads than one who sought the thing he loved. So it was a strange kind of a reaction. He was fleeing, he was running away. One would feel that he was running away from nature instead of going near nature. He was a lover of nature, he valued nature deeply, but his reaction was comparable to a person who was fearful of something and he was trying to run away from that particular thing rather than something that he valued and loved. For nature then, the coarser pleasures of my boyish days, and their glad animal movements all gone by, to me was all in all. So nature was beautiful, nature was lovely, nature was wonderful. It was something glorious to be felt with all his senses. So it was something that he wanted to experience with his senses, five senses. So he calls this a coarse pleasure, the coarser pleasures of my boyish days. So it was, of course, he was 23 years old at that time, as he was born in 1770, but he was relatively young at that time. So his reaction to this place was the reaction of a boy. And he was looking at nature like a young enthusiast who was, in fact, uh, as he had described, running about here and there and jumping about in joy. He could not stay in one place. It was difficult for him to remain in one place and enjoy the beauty of nature sitting down under the tree. So it was a kind of a restless state he was in. And that is why he is saying their glad animal movements all gone by. To me was all in one. Nature was everything to him. And it was the he loved nature for its own sake. There was no other thought in his mind. So this is the first stage, you can say, in Wordsworth's reaction to nature or his love of nature. So the first stage is purely a kind of a sensuous stage, a sensuous reaction to nature, and it is devoid of any other thought or any other kind of feeling. That would be coming later, during the later stages. But for the time being, during the first phase, it was like this. It was more like the reaction of an animal, a young animal, like a young deer, which was running around here and there, a restless, a kind of a frantic movement here and there. So I will end the class here, and I'll again, of course, ask you whether you have you have uh, understood this poem so far, and whether